the object must have weighed several tons to have caused the indentations. A lot of those people with that mindset get that from the book of Ephesians. There were burn marks and scorch marks on the sides of some of the trees, and there were 3 indentations in the ground, broadly speaking, in the shape of a triangle. And bear in mind, this is December, UK. It was freezing cold. The ground was fairly frozen. Colonel Holt has estimated that the object must have weighed several tons to have caused the indentations that it did. And at one point, I think a couple of the witnesses, both Colonel Holt and Jim Penniston, literally poured plaster of Paris into one of the holes, or maybe more than one, to get a mold of what the strut, or whatever you call it, the landing leg, whatever terminology, to what it looked like. It was not a particularly scientific.
But still, do we have that mold?
Yeah, we have that mold somewhere.
Like Britain has it, or?
You know what? I want to say that I think Colonel Holt still has it.
Oh, he kept it.
He kept it. Because when he left...
Can we pull up Colonel Holt, if you don't mind?
Yeah. And maybe Jim has one too. You know, these people are quite sneaky at like taking things which you would think would be in the official case file. Yeah. But this was more kind of personal memorabilia. One time, I forget whether it was Chuck or Jim. One of them was telling me that one time he took it somewhere and TSA kind of like, what the heck
TSA
is
stopped
this?
Him. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck is this?
This guy's still alive.
Yeah. Now,
shit.
I think he's about 80.
Yeah,
now.
He's on his way out, but maybe.
But he's a friend of mine, and
you know him still?
Yeah.
You think he'd come in and do a podcast about this?
I don't know if he'd come in. He's based. Where is he based? You know, I do know, but I've kind of forgotten.
All right, we'll talk about it off air.
Yeah. I think by a spooky coincidence, at one time he moved to Woodbridge in Virginia, and the name, of course, of one of the 2 bases was Woodbridge. was is it just one of those spooky?
It's a little perfect. I don't know.
Coincidences, or is it something? I don't know what it is. Anyway, so Colonel Holt, he goes out to the landing site, but one of the people that he takes with him is a guy called Munro Nevels. And Munro Nevels is the disaster preparedness officer, and he has with him a Geiger counter. And, of course, this is where I say, look, thus far we've talked quite a bit about saying eyewitness testimony from military personnel, some quite senior, but it is just testimony. Here we're segueing into physical evidence stuff, because Munro Nevels takes... He surveys the area with the Geiger counter, and he finds peak readings right in those 3 indentations. Not dangerous enough that he calls a halt and says, hey, back off, but enough of a spike reading to be like, whoa, something happened here, what the heck? And that's written into Colonel Holt's initial incident report sent to the British Ministry of Defence. So, because at some stage after this, of course, the base commander, the wing commander, says, hey, you've got to tell the Brits about this.
Yeah, so how long after was that? That was my next question.
A little bit too long.
Like a day?
Oh, no, like about 10 days.
That's sketchy.
It's a long, complicated, bureaucratic saga.
You guys had to be pissed about that.
We were a little, a UFO investigation. A UFO investigation is like a police investigation. Yes. As I said before, the first 48 is critical. To get a written report from the U.S. Air Force saying that there's been a landing. Oh, but by the way, it was like 2 weeks ago now. Yeah.
That's not great.
We were not, I say we, of course, I was only doing the cold case review, so I was not the contemporaneous investigator.
Someone got chewed out.
Somebody
for that
was, well, I don't know if they did, but if you know how to read very polite British sarcasm, some of the documents in the now declassified file reveal a degree of irritation with the US authorities for the delay and for the lack of information sharing. So, for example, this object was briefly tracked on radar, and there's a sarcastic comment along the lines of perhaps the Americans would care to share this information with us. I won't have time to get into this, and it's a level of detail too far, but that the status of forces agreement is the overarching, the NATO status of forces agreement is the overarching policy document that kind of sets out the framework for how all this works in terms of US bases on British soil. And you can have all sorts of esoteric things like, what if an American serviceman shoots an American serviceman on the American base who investigates? What if an American shoots a Brit? What if it happens off the base in the forest? And there are all sorts of kind of permutations of this. Who has jurisdiction? Who has primacy? Anyone can have jurisdiction. Jurisdiction can be concurrent, but only one person has primacy, self-evidently. So,
what's the difference?
Jurisdiction is the legal authority to investigate something. Primacy is who has the lead for it.
Okay. So it gets weird.
It gets weird, and to be honest, confusion about that is one of the things that led to the delay and the poor information sharing on this case. But the $64,000 question is about this level of radioactivity.
I feel like it's worth a little more than that. But
it's
well,
and
add a few zeros maybe.
When I did the cold case review, I was told that, well, this is actually spooky. My goodness, this is like a Russian doll or an onion. Every layer you peel. This is why.
Did you say a Russian doll and an onion?
A Russian doll or an onion,
or
where
an
you
onion.
peel the different layers. This is why, even though we're covering this as part of an interview on the whole shebang,
it's a good word.
This is why I've written a 100,000-word book about this case alone.
Which book was that?
Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, which I co-authored with Jim Penniston and John Burroughs, two of the U.S. Air Force witnesses.
We will put that link in the description so people go check it out.
I didn't mean to come on and do a book plug, but
I'm
just trying to tell you how much information there is about this, that just one of these cases I could write a 100,000-word book on.
And be able to do it without revealing classified information.
Yes. I had to submit the manuscript of that book both to the UK Ministry of Defence and to the Pentagon, so to DOPSA, to the, what is it called, Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review.
So you had to do both.
I had to do both. Again, because this was, people like Lou Elizondo, who has his book coming out, at least he only has to do it in one country.
Yeah.
I had to do it in both because this was on British soil, but involved US military personnel and US military bases. So I had to go to both the Ministry of Defence and to DOPSA.
Wow.
Anyway, the radioactivity levels turned out to be 6.66, on to infinity, 666, times higher than average background, which for those
future humans playing some games with us.
Well, future humans pretending to be demons by going with the whole 666 thing.
Right.
And of course, there are people who think that some aspects of the UFO phenomenon are demonic. I've come across that. Lou Elizondo has come across it. I remember him saying one time when he was trying to get his skeptical Pentagon bosses, one of them said to him, "Son, go read your Bible."
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of those people with that mindset get that from the book of Ephesians, where they describe Satan in terms of being, quote, the prince of the power of the air, unquote. And that's one of a number of reasons why some people think that this is demonic, or aspects of it are, and therefore they say you shouldn't study it because studying it feeds it and gives it energy, which you shouldn't do.
God, it gets so weird.
It does.
Yeah, I've done, there's been 2 podcasts that have covered this. I had Ron James in here for episode 151.
So one thing that Lou Elizondo told me, and that he's told this to other people, and he said it in the show Unidentified, one of the biggest things, surprisingly, that he ran into with opposition within the Pentagon, within the Defense Department, to the work that he was doing, is that there was a very large contingent of people that believed that this was a demonic force, as in demons, and that we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be investigating it. We shouldn't be poking the tiger in the eye.
They thought the phenomenon that was being witnessed was demons?
Yes, within the military establishment, within the Pentagon, within DOD, there was a large number of people that opposed his work because they thought from a very, very fundamentalist viewpoint that we're dealing with demonic activity.
And he was talking about, like, he spent a lot of the last 6-7 years really studying Lou Elizondo, sitting down with him for a very long interview, kind of got him to say a couple things that I'm sure Lou didn't really like saying. And Lou had told him all about that, and how there was like a piece of the Pentagon that was hell-bent on that's what it is.
Hell-bent. Very good.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even mean to do that, but that was pretty good. But then I had another guy in who comes at it from like a very different angle. This guy, Dr. Hugh Ross.
And so I was able to explain about 99% of what people thought was a UFO, but there was 1% that didn't fall into the category of a natural explanation, secret military activity, or a hoax.
Can you explain that 1%?
They clearly violate the laws of physics. They're observed going through the atmosphere at thousands of miles per hour, yet there's no sonic boom. There's no heat friction trail behind the, quote, craft. And there's 2,000 cases where they're documented as they're crashing into the Earth. You go to the crash site, you see a shallow crater. If there's snow, the snow is melted. If there's vegetation, the vegetation is damaged. But when you go around the crater site, there's no artifacts, there's no debris. It's like when an airplane crashes into the Earth, there's lots of debris to recover. With a UFO, there's nothing. But the fact that you got a crater, something real must have done that.
Who's like, he's one of those guys, extremely nice guy, smart physicist, the whole bit, but I think like his religion is kind of, his science is built to kind of fill his religion. That was just my takeaway. But he does talk about the angelic versus demonic end of this, and how his argument kind of hinges on one thing, it seems like, and that is because we don't have physical evidence that these things were here, like they don't leave behind physical evidence, that therefore it must be demonic. What would go against that argument there would be some of the eyewitness stuff, though, that you're speaking of in this case at Rendlesham, as one example, being there was a craft, it had hieroglyphics on it, whatever, it was touched by the person, but again, allegedly, because it's not like he chipped off a piece and kept it.
Well, it is kind of scary, I guess, that the argument for some of this being demonic is that it doesn't seem physically tangible, and yet this one case where it was, we ended up with 6.6.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
Bizarre.
kind of, and again, does that tie in? Demons are notorious tricksters. Almost every culture in human history has a trickster god.